And so will you welcome to our pulpit, Bonnie Zucco.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Zucco, and I am thrilled and honored to have been given the opportunity to preach to you this morning. I graduated from Monrovia High School recently, and by recently I mean this past Thursday. I will be attending George Washington University in DC in the fall, and will be studying political science and international relations while I'm there. Part of the process of writing this sermon was attending 2 meetings with my fellow youth preachers, as well as Ed, Jeremy, and John. A bit of these meetings was just covering logistical things, but a lot of it was talking about what the readings meant, how they tied to today, and what exactly we each had to say about them. Which is right about when I realized how in over my head I was. Unlike my fellow youth preachers, I have never once taken a religion class, and don't often have discussions or debates with my teachers about what exactly 1 Samuel is trying to tell us about the human condition. However, thanks to my astute emotional observational skills, I was able to tell that Genesis, one of today's optional readings, made me very incredibly angry. The reading focused on the end of Adam and Eve's time spent in the Garden of Eden. Adam is terrified that he's gone against God's wishes, and admittedly, unknowingly throws Eve under the bus. It makes me angry for a couple of reasons. The biggest one being how it set up Western culture and the world that I grew up in. When I was younger, I was very smart and a bit of a know-it-all. I mean, I still am, but that's besides the point. I answered practically every question in class, but I was polite about it. I raised my hand to speak in everything. Nevertheless, my kindergarten teacher approached my mother and requested that she ask that I not answer so many questions. Naturally, my mother refused and didn't tell me about the incident until much later, when I could understand just how ridiculous the request was. It was obvious that the request to not answer so many questions had not been made of my male classmates, and that I had been singled out because my assertiveness and confidence was not exactly ladylike. Where I'm trying to go with this is to show the tendency and the damage caused by this tendency of society's perpetuation that feminine qualities are somehow inferior or less than. This has been true since Genesis. Genesis has acted as a cultural guideline for generations, serving as the reasoning behind so many laws that kept women out of positions of power and dependent on the highest-ranking man in their life. While many argue that we've come so far, women can vote now. You aren't oppressed, stop complaining. This just isn't true. The highest-paid female CEO of 2014, Marissa A. Meyer of Yahoo, earned $42 million, which is a lot, but she was ranked 13th out of all CEOs. Another woman, Marilyn A. Houston of Lockheed Martin, does not follow until number 20. And while these are dramatic, extreme examples, this gap is present in every office. For goodness sake, my own mother makes less than the man in her office for doing literally the exact same job. On top of this, women are met with threats of violence for rejecting a man's advances and a host of double standards, like having to live every day with the expectation that they will look flawless, and yet, at the same time, are accused of being out to trick men when they wear makeup. And if those problems weren't bad enough, women are often encouraged to enter into fields traditionally dominated by men, only to be criticized later for feminizing the workplace. In other words, when women begin to outnumber men in a field, the value of that field goes down. It's why being a general practitioner is seen as a relatively difficult medical field, but pediatrician, which is essentially a general practitioner for children, as well as a female-dominated field of medicine, is seen as relatively easy. It's why the engineering field with the most women, civil engineering, is just coincidentally seen by other engineers as the easiest. I understand that this sounds weird, because if you're like me, any engineering is the hardest engineering, but these insulated communities are not free of sexism, And often these kinds of gaps grow where it is hard for the general public to see. And the really great thing is, it goes both ways. Computer science began to be seen as a woman's science sometime in the late 50s, shortly after it was introduced, due to the fact that it was tedious, and the male scientists of the time thought that you didn't get enough recognition for it. Flash forward a few years, Margaret Hamilton, one of the lead software engineers of the Apollo projects, and Katherine Johnson, an African-American physicist, helped take Americans to the moon. All of a sudden, men realized how important coding was to computers, and the next thing you know, Hamilton and Johnson and all of their accomplishments were pushed to the side. In today's reading from Mark, we encounter Jesus speaking to those who believe him to be capable of the miracles that he works, only due to working with forces from outside the realm of what was considered holy and right. Understandably, Jesus is just a little bit offended, but he rolls with it and turns it into a teaching moment, one that is necessary to remember even today. If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. It's clearly illogical for Jesus' detractors to say that he is ridding people of demons and the devil by working for the devil. And by pointing out this ridiculousness, Jesus brings attention to what they are really trying to do. They're undermining him and attempting to detract from his work. But we can also think on another level of what it means that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. We can think of it as a sort of call to arms, and when we think of it in this way, it is something that we seem to have spectacularly failed to do. Every day, people wake up and decide that they are going to contribute to or benefit from a society that is structured in such a way that only a few people reap the rewards. And when those that are pushed down begin to speak out, the divide just grows larger. The middle class is shrinking, racial minorities are being violently killed at an alarming rate, and I've already gone over a few of the problems women face. What will our response be? I already have some idea of how Jesus would respond. Jesus was considered a radical in his time because he stood with those that wanted to close that gap. The people that sat at Jesus' table were not well-off, middle-aged white men. They were poor, they were minorities, they were outcasts, and the Christian faith at large seems to have glossed over that. While All Saints has always been a place where I know that I can find people who agree with this sentiment, the other communities that I move in aren't. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of you as well. At school or work, wherever it is, I don't always feel secure in voicing the ideas that I've learned here. Larger communities that I'm a member of are very much steeped in old fire and brimstone Puritanism, the kind of Christianity that glosses over Jesus' biggest message, the kind of Christianity where the men are men and the women are women and everybody should be very afraid. It's difficult and exhausting to constantly go from that to this to that and back again, and it kind of makes you want to give up. Because here, I can see what the world has the potential to be, but I also see how I'm holding it back, and how we probably all are. We can't just come to church on Sunday, pat ourselves on the back, and then go back to our lives on Monday and stay silent when a friend makes a racist remark, because that's not a big enough deal to lose a friend over. The first step to closing the gap is educating those that are willing to learn. Perhaps if you tell your friend, hey, that's not an okay thing to say, or even just ask them why they think that the joke is funny and make them defend it, you'll get one more person who realizes the error of their ways and is willing to fight to close the gap. And if not, maybe they aren't a very good friend. The gaps in this world are big, but they aren't the abysses they once were. In the past years, they have begun to close, albeit very slowly. If we stay true to our values of love, peace, and the basic recognition that all of us are part of the same family, then it's possible that our divided house could become a united one in our lifetime. Amen.